Good afternoon. This is Becky Krause with Prince Corporation. On behalf of Prince Corporation, I'd like to welcome you to this afternoon's educational presentation on preparing for Pollinator Week, which is June 18th to 24th here, 2018. We're happy you could join us this afternoon. We will be recording both today's training and the one we are also hosting tomorrow morning. And we will be making those video recordings available on our Facebook page, YouTube, and then also on our website. So if some of your staff wasn't able to join us today, they will be able to view this presentation and training session. At this time, I'd like to welcome Meghann, Vice President of Sales and Marketing with Welliver Outdoors. Meghann has done extensive research on mason bees, America's native pollinator. She will be sharing information and tips on these amazing bees, why they are essential to our ecosystem, and how to help encourage nesting in your area. She will also be available to help answer any questions that you might have on pollinators and creating pollinator-friendly spaces. As I turn this presentation over to Meghann, I ask that you mute your phones to eliminate any background noise. If you have questions, you can simply unmute your phone and ask your question. Otherwise, we will be having some time at the end of the presentation for the webinar. So I have just turned this over to you, Meg, and you can get started whenever you're ready.
All right, thank you very much, Becky. I am very happy to be here today, and we're going to be focusing on the mason bee, which is America's native pollinator. I've been working with Welliver for about 5 years, and most of that time has been spent researching the mason bees and how they affect our ecosystems and all of the pollination. First, what are mason bees? Mason bees are North America's native pollinator. They were actually native to North America, where honeybees were originally imported with the European settlers. They are a solitary bee, so they do not have a hive. They are different in honeybees in that they do not have a queen, they do not make honey, and they don't have a social structure. Every female is her own queen, and she does her own work and takes care of her own eggs. They naturally have a 1-year life cycle, so they're not quite as susceptible to things like hive collapse. They're going to naturally die off after 1 year. So they're a little more hardy than the honeybees, and that helps them survive better in our current state of the ecosystems. They are part of the family Meghann. That includes the mason bees and the leafcutter bees. Within that, there are roughly 150 different species of mason bee, which belong to the genus Osmia. Within the Meghann, there are about 300 different species of these solitary bee pollinators. So there are a lot of them located all over North America. There are two main types of the mason bee that we see. The red mason bee is east of the Rockies. They look very similar to a honeybee. There's a picture on the lower left-hand side of your screen. The big difference you'll notice is that they are furry, and that is how they carry their pollen. They do not mix the pollen with saliva like honeybees do and carry it on their legs. They actually carry it all over their furry bodies. On the lower right-hand side of the screen, you will see the blue orchard bee. That bee is common west of the Rocky Mountains. They actually look like a little housefly. They're dark colored with a blue iridescent sheen. Okay, so like I said, these are a very hard-working pollinator. Mason bees can pollinate 50 times more than honeybees. In my research, I've seen it noted that they may pollinate 100 times more than honeybees, but they do know that 2 to 3 females on the mason bees can pollinate a mature apple tree. They are a great pollinator because the pollen is carried loosely on their hair. This allows for the pollen to easily be wiped off and added, really increasing the pollination. They also will work during rainy days or cooler temps when the honeybees are not as active. The mason bees become active when the spring temperatures reach about 50 to 55 degrees Fahrenheit. So the mason bees are great for pollinating the early spring flowers and fruit trees. The lower left-hand picture, you can see a mason bee that's covered in pollen and how that pollen sticks to all their little fur. And then you can also see one that is on an apple blossom. Okay. In preparing for the next generation of mason bees, the females will nest in cavities. They will look in nature for a woodpecker hole, a bug bore in an old log, or hollow grasses and reeds. They create cells within these tubes containing eggs and a nectar and pollen mixture packet. They cap the ends of the holes with mud. That is where they get the term mason. They are not carpenter bees, and they cannot excavate their own holes. So they do not pose any threat to any woodwork. Only the female bees carry pollen, although both the males and females will sip on the nectar. In an ideal conditions, a female can complete one cell with an egg per day. And at the end of the nesting season, the adults will die off. So now we'll learn a little bit more about the eggs. The eggs hatch into larvae. You can see the bottom left picture has you can see the cells clearly with the mud separating the eggs, and then a pollen packet with the little grayish white egg. So they'll hatch into our larvae, which eat the nectar pollen packet. It'll take about a week for the eggs to hatch, and then a month for the larvae to consume the pollen packet. After they consume the pollen packet, they will spin a cocoon, which is the pictures on the lower right-hand side. Those are the mud cells with the cocoon spun in the center of them. And they'll pupate within the nest tube. They are a fully formed adult by late summer, but will remain dormant over the winter within their cocoon. The following spring, a new generation of adults will begin to emerge when temperatures reach about 50 to 55 degrees. The males will emerge first. They are one of those amazing insect talents that the females know how to place the eggs, so that the male eggs are towards the front of the tube and the female eggs are towards the back of the tube, allowing the females to emerge second. Generally, the females will emerge 2 to 3 days after the males, depending on the weather conditions. The females will be active for 6 to 8 weeks collecting pollen and laying the new generation of eggs. This generally takes place from mid-April to June, depending on your region and the temperatures. Populations on mason bees can increase tenfold per year, although 2 to 3-fold is more common. So they can really increase exponentially, which will really help the pollination in the area. Females typically try to stay close to their original nesting tubes where they hatched from. And as long as there's about 3 to 5 empty tubes per female, she will stay there. If the population grows too much and there's not enough nesting area, they will fly away to try to find a new nesting spot. And we'll say a cousin to the mason bee is the leafcutter bee. They are part of the same family as the mason bees, and they have very similar life cycles where they're only a 1-year life cycle and they nest in tubes. But they become active when the summer temperatures reach 70 to 75 degrees Fahrenheit, and they use leaves instead of mud to create the cells and cap the ends of their tubes. So they are great for the summertime gardens. They're a great pollinator for gardens. You'll see the pictures on the bottom, the alfalfa leaf cutter bee. They're kind of a black and gray with the furry bellies. One of the big threats to the mason bees are pollen mites. Pollen mites are naturally picked up on flowers or as bees emerge from their nest tubes. The mites don't really, they're more of a pest to the adult bees, but they will decimate eggs before they have a chance to develop. The mites will eat the pollen ball that the female left with the egg and thus cause the larvae to starve. So if you see on the bottom left-hand picture, that is a mite those are mites on an adult mason bee. but you can really see the destruction they cause on the bottom right-hand picture. That is a cell where there was a pollen packet and an egg, and now it is just full of mites. So one of the problems when the other cells to the side, when those bees hatch and go to emerge in the spring, they have to walk through all of those mites to emerge from the tube. So they are naturally going to pick up mites. So one of the big things to help prevent mite infestations in a house is in the spring to clean out the house or to put new nest tubes in so that the mites that were picked up the year before do not contaminate the generation. And some information on encouraging the solitary bees. It's important to provide nesting and housing spaces with close access to dirt and flowers, as well as a water, somewhere for the bees to stop for water and to create the mud that they will need to cap the tubes. Over the winter, we suggest to place the house into an unheated garage, shed, breezeway, or barn. It's important that the cocoons get cold during the winter because the spring warm up is what triggers the end of dormancy and to emerge. It is also important that the cocoons are not brought into a warm area like your home, otherwise they will think it's springtime and start to emerge. So then we place back outside with the arrival of the early spring flowers like the crocus. And then it is very important because of the mites after emergence to clean or replace the used tubes in a house. The bees will travel about 300 feet for pollen. So as long as you're providing homes within an area where they can reach flowers within 300 feet, they will be happy. There's also some in-depth care that you can get into as a beekeeper over the winter. You know, naturally this has been happening for thousands of years without human interference, but this is one way to help prevent any future mite infestations. You can actually open the nesting tubes and remove the cocoons and wash them down to remove any of those mites. And then you can store the cocoons in a humidor in the refrigerator and control their release when it's true spring. So if you have a false spring in January or February where it's getting up into the 60s, keeping the cocoons in your refrigerator at the cooler temperature will hold their release until you're ready to put them out and you know the flowers are blooming. So encouraging the solitary bees, the main points are to conserve their nesting habitats, plant flowering bushes and trees and flowers, provide water for them, provide nesting sites for them, and a big thing is to reduce pesticide use if possible, or don't spray pesticides while the flowers are blooming or onto the blooming flowers, because that's where it will become in contact with the bees and could kill the bees. And if anyone has any questions on the mason bees or other solitary bees or pollination, I can help answer.
Does anyone have any questions for Meg? You can simply unmute your phone to ask them. Doesn't seem like anyone has any questions today, Meg.
Okay, well, I will be available tomorrow, and if anyone has questions that they haven't thought of, you know how to get a hold of me.
Okay, fantastic. I will mention again, we are hosting another webinar tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock a.m. Central Time. So if you have any questions or you have additional staff members, that was sent out in the same reminder email blast that went out yesterday. Thank you again, Meghann, for a fantastic, informative presentation. If anyone has any questions, certainly you can reach out to myself, or you can get in touch with our customer service department also, and we'd be happy to answer those. Again, thanks for attending this afternoon. We appreciate your business, and I hope everyone has a great Memorial weekend.